Mr. President, I come to the floor today to really speak about how we can avoid another shutdown of our government, and also, even more important, avoid another shutdown or slowdown of our economy. And that's how we in the Congress, both sides of the aisle, both sides of the dome, need to work to arrive at a budget agreement and then an appropriations agreement for the rest of the fiscal year. Earlier today on the floor, we heard from the distinguished chair of the Budget Committee, the gentlelady from Washington State, Patty Murray, to talk about the budget and what was going on. I come here today to support her efforts and the work of the budget conferees as they work to reach an agreement on the funding levels that will invest in America's future, creating jobs, repairing infrastructure, keeping us safe in our communities, and making sure that our children are well educated for the 21st century. The budget conference is absolutely important to America's future because it's how much should we invest in America's future? What should we do in terms of revenue? How do we close corporate loopholes and corporate welfare, and also have them step up to their patriotic responsibility? And also, what is the best way to approach the funding for this government? There is no doubt that we need to reduce public debt, but austerity alone is not the answer. We've seen it in Europe, where yes, they've reduced their public debt, but they have not been pro-growth. The agenda that I stand for, and I know that the chair of the Budget Committee does, and many of us on both sides of the aisle, is we not only want to reduce public debt, we also want to reduce unemployment. And we also want to reduce things like crime rates. So we need to be able to work together. My goals for the conference committee that's meeting are simple and straightforward. I would like to see the Budget Committee come up with not only a one-year framework, but a two-year framework, giving a top-line funding level for 2014 and 2015, and replacing the sequester policy for at least 2 years. And to do that with increased revenues and strategic cuts, a balanced approach. Now, let me say why this is important, because many people do not understand the difference between the Budget Committee and the Appropriations Committee. The Budget Committee looks at the entire budget of the government of the United States of America, money out and money in. So it looks at money out in two categories: discretionary spending, that's the Appropriations Committee; mandatory spending, that's Social Security, that's Medicare, that's veterans benefits. And then the other is revenue in, either through trust fund contributions or through fees or through taxes. The so-called top line is what discretionary spending is, what they allow for discretionary spending. In the budget, it's under an act called Section 30A of the budget. In order to do my job as the chair of the Appropriations Committee, need the Budget Committee, with the concurrence of the Congress, to give both my counterpart in the House, Congressman Rogers and Nita Lowey, myself and Senator Shelby, my vice chairman on the other side of the aisle, the so-called top line. Then we work through our 12 subcommittees. This is absolutely crucial because we cannot do discretionary spending for fiscal 14 till we hear from the Budget Committee. And we don't want another CR. We don't want another shutdown. We don't want another slowdown. We're ready to go to work. We've already done our due diligence. We've already worked through the subcommittees, 12 subcommittees, looking at what public investments should be made, and by the way, how we can be more frugal. How do we get rid of what is dated, what is duplicative, and what is dysfunctional? As the chair of the committee, again with Senator Shelby, the distinguished gentleman from Alabama, my vice chairman, we asked the committee to look at what is it we need to spend and what can we get rid of. We've done a great job this year. I'm really proud of them. And by August 1st, all of my subcommittees were marked up, but we need to have this agreement. So we say we need to have this agreement, and we need to have it sooner rather than later. Now, in the deal, the Budget Committee is to report out to the Congress and therefore to the Appropriations Committee by December 15th. I, with my committee and my counterparts in the House, are to produce an appropriations omnibus by January 15th. I don't want to get lost in words and the weeds here, but essentially, as it stands now, Congress will only be in session 8 days from December 15th to January 15th because of the holidays. 8 days is an awful lot to ask Barb Mikulski and Richard Shelby and Hal Rogers and Nita Lowy and our wonderful subcommittees to be able to produce a bill. So we'll do it if we have to, but we would prefer sooner rather than later. We feel so strongly about it that my House counterpart, Congressman Hal Rogers, a distinguished gentleman from Kentucky, and I say gentleman in the true sense of the word, civil, candid, straightforward, courteous. We've talked about issues, the differences in fiscal approach and so on, but we know how to get the job done. Where we differ, we know how to resolve the conflicts, and we're ready to go. We have sent a letter to the chair of the Budget Committee on both sides, to Senator Murray and to Paul Ryan, asking that they report to the Congress before the Thanksgiving recess. Before the Thanksgiving recess. This was unprecedented. Now, we didn't talk about dollars. That's the Budget Committee. We will take our pot of discretionary money, called the Topline, and get it done. What both the House chairman and I are really worried about is that if we don't act, sequester kicks in January 15th. What an awful way to do business in our government. You heard how I said my subcommittee chairmen have worked to look at what is dated, duplicative, and dysfunctional. That's just not meant to be an alliterative, clever throwaway line. It was a governing policy. Both sides of the aisle scrutinizing. And I'm just worried. I mean, when I look at defense, funding for defense would be $54 billion lower under the Senate's version in both defense and military construction. According to the military chiefs, the readiness of our force has been degraded under existing sequesters. 85% of Army brigade combat teams won't be fully deployed. The Navy and our Marine Corps will only have one carrier strike group and one amphibious ready group. They're always going to be Semper Fi, but we got to be Semper Fi too, and always faithful to getting the job done. The Air Force will have to cut aircraft and possibly an entire fleet. This is a dangerous time in the world with numerous threats to our security, and we can't operate our military on the cheap. And just to give you a sense of what furlough meant, over 650,000 national security employees were initially furloughed, both in defense and intelligence and in other security positions in key government agencies. This is unacceptable. You can't protect a country and run a government like that. I chair the Commerce Justice Subcommittee. That's the committee that funds federal law enforcement, FBI, drug enforcement, U.S. Marshals, the U.S. attorneys that actually move this, the Bureau of Alcohol and Firearms, It keeps us safe from terrorism. It catches child predators, prosecutes drug dealers and gangs. You know, think of how the FBI went after the Boston Marathon killers. The CJS bill adds $2.3 billion above sequester levels to allow federal law enforcement to do their job. U.S. Marshals track down violent fugitives and sex offenders. DEA goes after not only drug dealers, but international drug cartels, so it doesn't make it to the playground or to the schoolroom. The new FBI director recently announced that if sequester continued, the FBI will have to furlough people up to 10 days over the next year. This is not good. In the long term, CR at the sequester level, a continuing resolution, will fund the hiring. They will keep a hiring freeze of over 3,000 positions. You can't have the kind of law enforcement we need at those levels. So, Mr. President, I just say this. We have a big job to do. We have to do it sooner rather than later. I really ask the support of the Congress to the Budget Committee for them to really be able to bring a budget to the floor. Let's try to do it before the Thanksgiving break. Let's look at how we can look at a balanced approach between strategic cuts. And we on the Appropriations Committee are ready to keep on doing the job that we started almost 7 years ago under Senator Byrd, a wonderful, beloved, most beloved leader of West Virginia, Senator Inouye, Senator Stevens. We need to keep on doing that, but we need the Budget Committee to do their job. The impact on national security is really significant. The impact on our domestic economy is really significant. We need to be able to step up the plate and not only avoid a crisis like a shutdown, we also have to avoid the crisis of confidence that's occurring in our government. Can they govern? Can they get the job done? Are there significant pragmatists that will really look at what is the must-do list we have around spending, of which I think security for our country is at the top of the list? And I believe we can do it. I know the presiding officer was part of a bipartisan group during the shutdown to try to find a compromise. For that group, I salute them. They changed the tone, showed civility, showed bipartisanship, and I think their initial effort was enough to stimulate and encourage then coming to the final resolution that we did. That's the kind of spirit we need in the body. And I just say to my colleagues, let's have the Budget Committee act sooner rather than later. Let's support them in a balanced approach to not only look at austerity, but also growth. And that also means closing corporate loopholes. So, Madam President, I welcome you to the chair. And I think that concludes what I wanted to say today. But as we get ready to approach the holidays, I want the American people to have confidence in their government. And I want the American people to have confidence in those of us who've been elected. This is a big election day all over America. And I just recall this time last year, the re-election of President Obama, the election of the gentlelady from Massachusetts, the presiding officer today. It was a big day. It was a big deal. 20 women came to the Senate. New Democratic woman, a distinguished new woman from the state of Nebraska. And when they came, full with excitement, filled with passion to serve the nation, represent and be the voice of the people in their state, and to get something done. And not only to do it in the lowest common denominator, but also to be able to work together for the common good and worry about the next generation, not the next election. That's what we did. Let's recall how we felt this time last year. Let's get our act together and press on. Madam President, I yield the floor.